Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, we're going to be going over Pittsburgh's options at the quarterback position if they're going to have to replace Aaron Rodgers in 2026, whether Rodgers retires or whether Rodgers falls off a cliff here in the second half of the 2025 season. In either one of those scenarios, the Steelers are going to be looking for a new quarterback next year. So today we're going to be breaking down some of the options that could be available in the 2026 offseason and which guys would potentially fit and who probably wouldn't fit. We've got a lot of options to talk about on today's show, guys. So kick us off down there in the comment section by letting us know. What is the percent chance that Aaron Rodgers is the Steelers starting quarterback next year? Put it on a scale of 0, meaning no chance he comes back next year. He's absolutely done after this season, to 100%, meaning he is definitely coming back for another season. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Now, before I start with the potential replacements for Aaron Rodgers, I do want to make abundantly clear that I am still very open to Aaron Rodgers returning in 2026. Just because we're talking about potential replacements today doesn't mean that if Aaron Rodgers plays really well down the stretch and, he wants to come back for another season, that I would say no to that. If he plays, if he plays the way that he has played for a majority of this season, not the way he played against the Chargers, but if he continues to play some good football down the stretch, this team makes the playoffs, and he finishes this season strong, I'm absolutely open to him returning as this team's starting quarterback in 2026. But with that said, I think we do have to acknowledge that it's still very possible that Pittsburgh will be looking for a new starting quarterback next year, whether that's Aaron Rodgers retiring at the end of the year, which he has alluded to a number of times, or whether that's he just plays poorly down the stretch and, old age is catching up to him and he's just not a good player anymore. In those two cases, the Steelers will be looking for a new quarterback, so I think it's worth the discussion to see who could potentially be out there during the 2026 offseason. Now, the big question at the end of the 2025 campaign that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to kind of answer, and this is going to affect a lot of things. This is going to affect Mike Tomlin's future with the team. This will affect who they get at quarterback. This will affect whether or not they consider trading T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, and a lot of the older veterans on this team. Are the Steelers going to try and continue to try and win Super Bowls in the present heading into 2026, or will they embrace a rebuild and take a step backwards as an organization to draft younger players and kind of embrace a new day of Pittsburgh Steeler football? And that's going to be an interesting question to see what the answer to that question is going to end up being. I think a lot of things are going to go into that decision, where the Steelers finish in terms of their record and how successful they are in the postseason, if they even make the postseason. And, I think that if they want to win now, and I think if that's the answer to that question, which is honestly pretty likely, Cam Hayward only has 1 year left on his contract, and he's likely to retire after the 2026 campaign. My guess is the Pittsburgh Steelers, at least for one more season, will in fact try to win now. And if that's the case, and Aaron Rodgers is not going to be that answer, they're going to need another veteran starting quarterback. All right, so we got some options to discuss here. First one is a very familiar name that we talked about this offseason, and that's Matthew Stafford. Okay, and I think, what was crazy was I remember doing polls on this channel saying, would you rather have Matthew Stafford or Justin Fields as the starting quarterback of the Steelers? And like 65% of Steelers fans said Justin Fields, which is nuts to me. But Stafford is one of those guys that has been on a year-to-year kind of situation with his current team with the Los Angeles Rams. And the Rams seriously considered letting him go this offseason. Apparently they were very close to trading him to the Las Vegas Raiders. Just because, they've been kind of in a year-to-year situation with his contract, and he continuously wants to get paid like top 10, top 5 caliber quarterback money. And, it certainly seems like next offseason, especially if Stafford doesn't play quite as well down the stretch, it could be a possibility that they don't give him another 1-year extension next offseason, and they could look to trade him to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers that could potentially be looking for one last ride for Cam Hayward. And listen, man, Stafford would be kind of that next evolution of the veteran quarterback option here in Pittsburgh, right? You start with Russell Wilson, then you upgrade to Aaron Rodgers, and I think we'll all, kind of say Rodgers has been better than Russ so far this season. And I think Stafford would be an even higher step up from where Rodgers is this year. Stafford still arguably playing at a top 5 quarterback level, even though he himself is getting older. So if you can land him, this would be kind of the next iteration and in the next step up in the Pittsburgh Steelers search for that veteran quarterback. to get this team potentially into Super Bowl contention. So certainly Matthew Stafford, if he's available and you're not bringing back Rodgers, I would be highly interested in bringing in Stafford. But then Daniel Jones is still slated to be a free agent next offseason. Now, I highly doubt he gets to free agency, okay? The Colts just traded 2 first-round picks in exchange for Sauce Gardner. So I would say I would fully expect the Indianapolis Colts at some point to come to some sort of agreement with Daniel Jones to be their next franchise quarterback and to give him a 2-3 year extension, especially over the course of those 2 first-round picks that the Colts won't have an opportunity really to draft a future rookie quarterback with, right? So I think that Daniel Jones will be in Indianapolis for probably this year as well as at least the next 2 years, barring some unforeseen disaster from him. But, technically he is slated to be a free agent at the time of me recording this video, so we at least have to talk about him. But certainly he's probably a game manager type of quarterback that the Steelers would probably consider paying if he ends up hitting the open market. But then going back to the trade market here, Kyler Murray has been a popular name among some Steelers fans as a potential option, dealing with injuries this year. Some people are kind of theorizing that he's getting soft benched by Jacoby Brissett there in Arizona this season because the Cardinals want to keep him healthy enough to be able to trade him next offseason. I certainly think that's a possibility. Kyler has not been super productive over the last several years under the Jonathan Gannon regime, but former MVP candidate, he's still pretty darn young, and he does have a lot of talent. So if the Steelers are looking for somebody, to kind of bring on as a reclamation project as a former high-end starter in this league that still has a lot of talent. I don't know how, his little body would hold up in the AFC North necessarily, but it certainly would be an interesting one there if the Pittsburgh Steelers can pull something off for Kyler Murray. Another guy that they could consider is Geno Smith. Now, Geno has just fallen off a cliff this year in Las Vegas, but, the Geno stands out there would say, well, that's because the Raiders are terrible. They haven't had Brock Bowers for most of the season. The defense is terrible, so they're constantly having to throw the football in the second half. The run game hasn't been great. The pass protection's been bad. The weapons aren't good. And Geno Smith, being a very aggressive quarterback, has been, putting the ball in harm's way pretty much out of desperation. Now, I think that Geno has certainly regressed from where he was in his Seattle days. There are some years there in Seattle where he was pretty darn good and maybe in a better situation like in Pittsburgh. He could, find another life in the National Football League as a starter. He'd probably come cheap in a trade for somebody that's a big body with a big arm, lots of big plays on his film over the last several years. It's at least a name to consider. And then Tua Tagovailoa is another name that could be out there in the trade market. But personally, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of the Tua Tagovailoa idea, especially when it comes to an AFC North team, because I just don't know if he can play in cold weather. And, once the schedule turns to November, it gets pretty cold in this division, man. It gets pretty cold in Pittsburgh. So I just don't have any trust whatsoever in Tua Tagovailoa to play in the cold. He's had opportunities to play in cold weather games throughout his career, and he's had some of the worst games of his career in those kinds of conditions. He doesn't have a strong arm, so when it's windy outside, he's not going to be able to cut through it. And he's really a player that is very dependent on the scheme itself. All right, if you don't have an elite scheme with elite players around him, he's not going to be somebody that's very effective for you. So for me, even though Tua Tagovailoa, very productive player throughout his time, especially during the Mike McDaniel era there in Miami, I just don't think it's a fit here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what's the best way forward? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. What should the Pittsburgh Steelers do next year? Should they try and continue to win now, type W for win now, or do you think they should embrace a full-scale rebuild and take a step backwards so that they can take 2 steps forward in the near future? Type R for rebuild or W for win now. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to let you guys know about a great piece of Steelers apparel that you guys can get in your closet today. But while I tell you about that opportunity, make sure you answer today's pinned question down there in the comments. And if you guys want the limited edition Steelers Salute to Service hoodie, officially licensed by the National Football League, you guys can use our link, chatsports.com/PitSalute25. to get it in your closet today, especially if there's somebody in your life that loves the Steelers that you're looking for a great Christmas present for. This is a great item to go get here because I really like the Army green color this year, guys. Usually they really go heavy camo, and I just don't know how versatile camo is, year-round necessarily in a bunch of different situations, but I think this Army green can be worn in any situation. Also, you got that awesome American flag patch there on the right sleeve. You got the Steelers patch on the chest. It's just very minimal looking. which I really appreciate, guys. So if you like the style of this hoodie, you want to get it today, go chatsports.com/pitsalute25 to get it in your closet today. All right, so now let's talk about some quote-unquote rehab quarterback options for the Steelers, because there's certainly been some quarterbacks over the last several years that were kind of left for dead, people kind of labeled as busts, and then they turned out to be really good starting quarterbacks when you put them in the right situation. Just a couple off the top of the head there. Sam Darnold, obviously with the Minnesota Vikings and now with the Seattle Seahawks. Sam's arguably a top 10 quarterback in the league right now. He's playing almost at an MVP level. He was playing unbelievable football. Daniel Jones was left for dead in New York. Then he goes to a better situation in Indy, and all of a sudden he looks like, a legitimate franchise quarterback. And there's a lot of different examples out there, especially recently. Baker Mayfield, left for dead, all right, was considered a backup level quarterback. And now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league playing for Tampa Bay. So there's a lot of these guys out there, former first-round picks and, high draft picks that just haven't worked out, that in the right situation could really work out with a new team. And, I think that the top guys in this category, Trevor Lawrence, hasn't had the best season to this point, and if things really hit the skids in Jacksonville, he's got a very tradable contract, and if Liam Cohen wants to go get quote-unquote his guy in the draft next year, and you want to get a pretty high draft pick for Trevor Lawrence, Lawrence certainly has the body and the arm strength to be able to play in the AFC North. That would be one that I'm highly interested in if he's available. Mac Jones, probably less so. He's playing good ball with San Francisco, but he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. He plays well in Shanahan-style offenses, so maybe that would be a fit with Arthur Smith. But personally, he's not my favorite option. Justin Fields, we know Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith like Justin Fields, but he's had a number of opportunities in this league, man. He's just never made it work. Bryce Young, another guy that's kind of smaller, not the biggest arm. Not sure if he's a great fit for AFC North football, but he's a former number 1 overall pick, and Carolina could be looking to move off of him this offseason. Then Tyler Shuck. I mean, if the Saints have like the number 1 or number 2 pick and they can take Ty Simpson or Fernando Mendoza or one of these guys, Tyler Shuck is a guy that I know Arthur Smith was high on in this year's NFL draft. He played very well last week. If he continues to play well down the stretch, it's certainly possible that the Steelers could be in on him as well, even though I would say that one is probably less likely. But another option that the Steelers could do next offseason is that they could bring in a bridge quarterback and then bring in a younger quarterback to learn from that bridge QB. This is something that most NFL teams do when they plan to draft a quarterback. Some of the bridge options out there, one of them is currently on the team. Mason Rudolph still has another year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He signed a 2-year contract. So honestly, that might be my preferred option just because, he's already on the team. And we've seen Rudolph, do some good things with this team as the starting quarterback. So as a mentor to a younger player, I would have no problem with Rudolph playing that role. But Jacoby Brissett is playing some good football for the most part in Arizona this year. He doesn't turn the ball over, has a big arm. He's a system quarterback that if you scheme things up for him, he can hit open windows. Joe Flacco is another guy that, he would complete the cycle for the AFC North. He'd play for every single AFC North team. We know Mike Tomlin has a lot of respect for him. If he comes back for another season, he could be a bridge option for this team. Tyrod Taylor, another guy that protects the football, big play kind of guy, can run around a little bit, getting older though. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, somebody that's played in Shanahan-style offenses quite a bit in his career, could certainly be a bridge option for somebody next year. But when it comes to the young quarterback options that you can pair with that bridge guy, you could look at 3 different options, in my opinion. You could stick with Will Howard, who you drafted last year and the team really likes, or you could go with a rehab quarterback, somebody that's been cast aside, somebody that can learn from a veteran but maybe can be your future, or you could draft a quarterback in the early rounds of the NFL draft. And, we'll start with the first option there with Will Howard. And as much as I like Will, I just don't know if Pittsburgh should necessarily bank on a 6th-round pick being their franchise quarterback of the future. I know a lot of people like Will, especially because guys like John Gruden have hyped him up saying he's like the next Josh Allen and all this stuff. But, he's not going to be Josh Allen, guys. He just doesn't have the dynamic playmaking ability. He's not as good of a rusher as Josh Allen is. All those different things. And, I think the reality of the situation when we're looking at the AFC conference is that if we want this Pittsburgh Steelers team to be perennially in the Super Bowl hunt, all right, you're going to have to get one of these superstar level quarterbacks, especially once they get to that second contract, because the one-way ticket to purgatory is you draft a quarterback that's good but isn't great, and you pay that good quarterback elite level money, and then you don't have any money to surround that good quarterback with the surrounding cast that they need in order to compete for Super Bowls. But teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, all right, these teams with legitimate superstar quarterbacks that are continuously in the hunt for Super Bowls, those are the guys with the elite quarterbacks. And the Steelers have to do their very best to try and get one of those types of guys as their next franchise quarterback if they want to get on that level, which I think we all want for this team. And when I look at Will Howard, even though he was a 6th-round pick, I do think he has starter potential. Okay, I think that he has the potential to be someone like of the ilk of a Derek Carr. Now, I think he'd be more athletic than Derek Carr is, but both have strong arms, both have good deep balls, but neither of them are necessarily special in the mental processing department or the accuracy department, to be quite honest with you. And if Derek Carr, there's nothing wrong with Derek Carr. Derek Carr was a fine starting quarterback in this league for a long time, but he never won a playoff game playing inside the AFC for the Raiders for many years, and never won one with New Orleans either, for a reason. It's because he's a limited quarterback, and that's what I think the upside for Will Howard is. So I'm just not sure if I want to bank on that upside, especially in this conference with so many superstar QB talents to compete with. But some of the other rehab quarterback options that you could consider, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of bringing any of these guys in because they're such long shots at this point. But, these are guys with some level of talent, whether they're 1st-round picks, 2nd-round picks. A lot of them have good arm talent. They can move. They've still got some level of physical talent left in them. So if you wanted to bring them in, you could think about it. But honestly, guys, I think if you're bringing in a younger quarterback, I would want to draft a quarterback in the early rounds of the NFL draft and draft your guy of the future that this coaching staff falls in love with as their guy. And there's a lot of interesting options that are going to probably come out in next year's NFL draft, all right? The top 3 definitely right now are Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza, and Dante Moore. You're probably going to have to trade up for one of those guys if you want them because they're probably going to be going in the top 8 of the draft this year. Lenora Sellers is a very intriguing option. Will he go back to school? Will he come out? And could he be available for the Steelers to go get? Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati is a name you guys should be watching out for. Darian Mensah, another guy you should be watching out for out of Duke. Jordan Mayava's had a very productive season with USC this year. John Mateer, not sure if he's going to come out either, but he's very intriguing as a developmental type of quarterback prospect. Sam Levitt probably doesn't come out this year after getting injured this season. He'll probably go back to school as a redshirt sophomore. But he's a very intriguing physical talent if he does come out. And Carson Beck, not my favorite option there, but a lot of people like the mental processing on him. So just some names to keep your eye on there. But my preferred strategy, guys, at the quarterback position next year is that I want to have it set up so that this team has an established number 1 veteran quarterback that's not going anywhere. Okay, they're going to be your starter next year, but then you draft a young quarterback that can develop behind that quarterback, whether that's trading for Matthew Stafford and then drafting a quarterback, whether that's bringing back Aaron Rodgers and drafting a quarterback, whatever the case is with that situation. I would rather have an established veteran QB1 that's a little bit on the older side, on a 1-year deal, and then you have that young quarterback to learn from that veteran quarterback for an entire season, and then that quarterback takes the reins as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers at the start of the 2027 campaign. That's my preferred strategy, but now it's your turn. What say you guys? What is your ideal QB1 and QB2 duo here in Pittsburgh for next year? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. For me, I would probably say Matthew Stafford and Ty Simpson. That would be my ideal setup. How likely that setup is, probably not very, but that would probably be my ideal setup that is at least somewhat realistic for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for talking some quarterbacks here with me today. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already for more extensive Steelers coverage all throughout the 2025 season.